Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Very, very happy to have you here. I wanted to say thanks to everybody who's been sending in questions as well recently. Really great to hear from you. A couple of things I wanted to let you guys know about before we get into today's question, which is a great one, as always, because you guys always ask amazing questions. And first of all, those of you who are waiting for the launch of the Fluent Spanish Academy, thanks for your patience. It should have been live by now, but unfortunately, we've been hit by a couple of technical delays. Nothing that will stop me, though. I'm going to push forward anyway. But yeah, a couple of technical problems, as usual, just getting the website up and running. But that's coming very, very soon, and it's super exciting, so stay tuned for that. A number of you guys have also asked about transcripts for the podcast and whether or not I have transcripts. I haven't been producing them, to be honest, because, well, obviously it takes if I was to sit and write every single word that I say on the podcast, it would take a very, very long time, which I don't have time for. And also to produce the transcripts professionally, it would also be very expensive. So I haven't been doing that right now, but I know you guys want transcripts, so I'm definitely going to think about ways I could do that. It needs a bit more thought still, but it's on the agenda, it's on my mind, and I'll hopefully do something about that fairly soon, because I'm a huge fan of listening and reading, so I know it would help lots of you out if you could also read along at the same time as listening to the podcast. Now, without any further ado, let's dive into today's question from Wanyong.
Hi Olly, I'm Wonyang from Korea. I've been in Australia for 2 years, and I think my English learning process is stopped. I can't see any further progress on me improving English. I think it is really hard to check the process of learning English or learning language. What I mean by that is, for example, when someone wants to improve math or other subjects, what they have to do is to buy the subject books and solve the questions. And they will see how many books they've done at the end. But in case of learning language, I guess there is no way to check the process, which is visionable. So here are my 3 questions. First, how do you know my English is still being improved? Second, is there any way to check learning process? Last, how do we know somebody masters their aimed language? Thank you.
Okay, Wanyong, thank you so much for your question, and what a great question, and I want to congratulate you on your English as well, which is fantastic. So the time in Australia has certainly been well used. So you've asked some very deep questions here. Let me summarize the 3 that you asked me. So first of all, how do I know if I'm still improving in my English? That's number 1. Number 2 is, how can I check my progress? And then number 3 is, how do you know if you have mastered a language? Now, okay, where do we start? Lots of stuff to say here. Now, you mentioned the example of maths, and you can say, well, if you want to learn maths, then you can just get a textbook, and you can kind of work through the textbook, and you kind of got this guided study plan, right? So you kind of know what to study, and you can measure your progress that way. And you said that you can't do that with a language, but actually, you can. I mean, there are lots and lots of books out there, especially for English. As an English learner, you're spoilt for choice. You have tons and tons of books, and you can, you've got books, for example, that teach you English verbs. You've got intermediate, and then upper intermediate, advanced 1 and 2, and so you've got that progression there. You have, popular textbook series that run through different levels. You've got, for example, IELTS exam books. You've got intermediate, upper intermediate, advanced. So you absolutely can kind of work through books that will give you this sense of progression through different levels. But for me, that's not really the issue here, because what you're talking about is a kind of academic approach to the language. If you take the point of maths, for example, there are different kind of maths. There's different kind of maths and different kind of mathematicians. So you've got, for example, theoretical mathematicians who will spend their time in universities coming up with theories and work in very kind of abstract theoretical terms. But they don't actually use their maths for anything specific for any real life application, right? Likewise, you've got many linguists around the world, academic linguists who study language. They study how language is used, and they many of these guys, they spend their entire careers in universities talking about language in a very academic way without actually using it. But the thing is, here's the point. Maths is actually used for real purposes by many people around the world every day. So to continue this analogy with maths, you use maths to calculate your budget every month, how much money you have. If you have a party, you use it to calculate the number of guests for a party. How many? If John brings 3 guests and Anna brings 7 guests, how many people do we have? You use it to figure out your mortgage payments if you own a house. And then some people will then go on to use maths to, for example, calculate the gravitational pull of the sun or the distance to the next star or something like that. I mean, you can use maths for all kinds of purposes. And so, in that situation, if you're asking, well, how do I know if my maths is improving? How can I check my progress? How do I know if I've mastered maths? Well, the question is, what are you using it for? And if you're using maths if all that you need to use maths for is to calculate the cost of your weekly shopping, then, and you can do that fine, then your questions stop mattering really, because you can do everything you need to do with your current level of ability in maths. So when people kind of talk to me about improving their English or improving a language, often I think, well, what does that mean? Improving. Improving what? Your reading, your vocabulary, your speaking, your ability to deliver a presentation. I mean, what is it? What do you need to do? And why do you want to improve? If you are studying English right now, and then you plan, for example, let's say you plan to go back to Korea, and then you will join a Korean company and never have any need for English. Well, why are you improving your English? These questions are all very, very linked. Now, I'm guessing, if you're living in Australia, you've probably got a desire to use your English for something in particular. Now, that might be, for example, to make friends. It might be to get into university in Australia. It might be to go back to Korea and get a job in an English trading firm in Korea using your English. So these are the questions that you've got to ask yourself. So in my case, I think about my Cantonese, which is a long-term project very much. It's tough and it's long. Sometimes I get these feelings of oh man, I haven't made any progress in 6 months. But when I think about these things to myself, I ask myself, I don't ask myself am I still improving? How can I check my progress? I never ask myself these questions. I ask myself, can I do such and such a thing? Can I do this? Can I do that? And I work with what you would call can-do statements. Can I order food in a restaurant in Cantonese? Can I arrange to meet my friend for coffee at 5:30 in Covent Garden? Can I do these things? And the can-do statements are based around the things that I currently want to be able to do in Hong Kong, with Cantonese, sorry. And so there's lots of things I can't do. I could not open a bank account probably in Hong Kong, but I don't care because I don't need to do that. Maybe you in Australia, maybe you do need to open a bank account, so that becomes relevant to you. Likewise, I don't need at the moment to read and write Chinese characters. But if I wanted to go to university in Hong Kong, then I damn well would have to learn to read and write Chinese characters quickly. But otherwise, I could go for my whole life and never learn to read and write Chinese characters. So what does it mean to improve? One of the things that I often find myself talking about with different languages, partly because of what I do for a living, I guess, is talking about the language learning process. So one thing that's on my mind at the moment, for example, is I can't really talk about the language learning process as well as I would like to in Cantonese. And so that's something I'm working on at the moment, is can I better, more accurately describe the process of learning a language in Cantonese, because that's something that's going to be useful for me. So for you in Australia, you have got a particular daily life in which English matters to you. And so I would encourage you to and it's difficult to say without knowing your situation in more detail. But I think that you would probably benefit from maybe putting the books away and stop worrying about, have I learned enough verbs this week, or have I learned enough new words, or have I progressed to B2 or C1 level? Like, stop worrying about that and think, well, what is it that I really want to use English for in my life? Like, I have a course called Time Control, which is all about time management and how to use the time that you have to learn languages efficiently. Really, really popular course, and people have been really, really enjoying it. And one of the questions that I ask in that course is, in terms of goal setting, is that what would make me happy or proud right now? So for you, Wanyong, like, think about your English. Like, what would make you happy or proud right now to use your English for? What would it be? Would it be to, I don't know, to get a girlfriend, an Australian girlfriend? Would it be to, I don't know, to be able to watch TV and understand everything? Like, what do you want from your English? And then use that as your goal. And what will happen is, if you focus all of your energies on that one thing, then all of your studies will conspire to help you achieve that. So that's the thing to be thinking. I think ultimately the question of, am I progressing? Am I still improving? It doesn't really matter, provided that you're working towards things that you want to be able to do, because then real life will come to your aid and it will help you see this all through. Now, as for the question, how do you know if you've mastered English or if you've mastered a language? Mastering a language, well, again, that depends on what you need it for. Like, what's your definition of mastering? Do you speak exactly like a native speaker with no mistakes? In that case, it's a lifetime's work. Is it, can you do a university course in English? For me, my personal definition of have I mastered the language is, can I do everything I want or need to be able to do in the language effectively? And if the answer is yes, then I don't know if I've mastered that language, but for my purposes, for my life, for the things that I want to be able to do, I'm happy, and that's the only thing that matters. There are all kinds of other answers to these questions, to be honest. Like, there are ways of tracking your progress, and some of these things we talked about on the podcast before. But the more I do these things, like the more time I spend with languages, the more I tend to think to myself, actually, none of this really matters. It's all about you. What makes you happy? What are your reasons for doing it? That's the only thing that really matters. Unless, of course, you have a specific aim, like, I need to get into university, or I need to get this job, in which case, then you have a very clear goal, which is a great thing. All right, so I hope that's helpful, and thank you very much for the question. If you would like to ask me a question, the address to go to is iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. And if you have been enjoying the podcast, please tell a friend about it. You can pull out your phone, send an email, put a little post on Facebook. Why don't you tell one person today about this podcast? Maybe you have a friend who's learning languages, or would like to learn a language, or is struggling with languages. If you could let them know about this podcast, that would hopefully be good for them. It would be fantastic for me as well, and I would thank you very, very much. Now, talking about reasons and motivation and progress and things like that, one of the things that I most like to do in a language is to to learn songs. And songs for me, like, they're not always that useful practically for your language learning, but they do motivate me like nothing else. Like, if I learn a song and I learn to sing that song, I'm just so happy. I think one of the coolest things to do. And so a couple of days ago, I actually recorded a song in Cantonese and I stuck it on YouTube. So if you'd like to check out this video, you see me playing jazz piano and singing a song in Cantonese. I had loads of fun. You'll either love it or hate it. I don't know which. But if you'd like to check it out, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/episode 110, and I'll put that video in the show notes for you to check out. All right, so hope that was useful for you, and I'll see you back in the next episode of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. And here at Story Learning, everything that I do is powered by stories, whether that's writing books, teaching lessons, crafting courses. My mission is to help everyone succeed at learning a new language through the power of story. And we now have comprehensive language courses in over 15 languages, from Spanish to French, Korean to Japanese, and across all levels from beginner to mastery. And you can take a 7-day free trial of any of these programs by visiting storylearning.com/courses. I've poured my heart and soul into creating these courses over the last 10 or so years, and we've helped tens of thousands of new students achieve their dreams of learning a new language, all through the power of story. So go ahead and take a free trial. There's no commitment. You can try out our method for free, see if this can also be the breakthrough for you that it's been for so many other people. storylearning.com/courses.